If the bank called saying your house is already in foreclosure auction, take a deep breath. Because in most cases, that's not the end of the story, it's just the beginning of a negotiation they don't want you to know exists. As a lawyer, I've seen families give up out of fear when in fact they had every right to challenge the entire process. Stay until the end, because I'm going to show you exactly what to say on that call, and why it changes everything. The phone rings on an ordinary afternoon. On the other end of the line, a calm, procedural voice says something that changes everything. Your house is already scheduled for auction. For a second, the world stops. Your breath catches, your stomach tightens, and a feeling of loss floods your body before your mind even manages to process what it just heard. It's in that moment, exactly that instant of shock, that most people make the mistake that will define the outcome of the entire process. Because when someone hears that sentence, the first impulse is to believe. There's nothing left to be done. Your mind screams that the battle is over, that the bank has won, and that all that's left is to accept the inevitable. Thousands of homeowners across the United States live out this exact script every year. They get the call, feel the weight of the news, and simply hand over the keys without checking a single thing. Without confirming dates, without confirming notices, without confirming whether every step of the foreclosure process was actually carried out the way the law requires. And here's something few people know. The phrase, "your house is already in foreclosure auction," doesn't always mean the property has been lost for good, irreversibly. In many U.S. states, between the moment that news is delivered and the moment the house actually changes hands, there's still a window, sometimes small, sometimes larger than you'd expect, where important decisions can still be made. The truth is, what a homeowner says in the first few seconds of that call can carry more weight than you'd imagine. Certain words open doors. Others shut down any possibility of negotiation completely. And that's exactly what this video is about. What to say, what to avoid saying, and why the way you react to that news can be the factor that separates someone who loses everything quickly from someone who still manages to fight for time, for alternatives, and for answers the bank is obligated to provide. After the initial shock, the most common reaction among people who receive this news follows: the apology. It sounds strange, but that's exactly what happens. The person feels guilty, ashamed, as if they'd failed somehow, and ends up saying things like, "I know I owe it, I'm sorry," or "Go ahead and set the date, I'll be out by then." Words spoken in a moment of emotional fragility. But that can be interpreted as full acceptance of the situation. The problem is that the bank isn't on the other end of that line to comfort your suffering. It's following its own script, based on internal procedures and legal deadlines that are part of a process called foreclosure. And most people simply don't know the steps of that process, the documents that should have been sent, the notices the law requires, and the minimum deadlines each U.S. state establishes before an auction can actually take place. This means something important. The homeowner has the right to demand, on the spot, specific information about that process. It's not a courtesy from the bank. It's a right. And when a person doesn't know that, they hand over, without realizing it, a huge advantage to the other side of the table. Think of it this way. It's like signing a contract without reading it. Just because the person offering it seems trustworthy and is in a hurry for you to sign right away. The emotion of the moment pushes you toward a quick decision. And that's exactly when important mistakes go unnoticed. Wrong dates, notices that never arrived, reviews that were never properly done. All of it can slip by, unnoticed, when the conversation stays stuck in the fear of losing the house. That's why the turning point is interrupting that emotional cycle and turning the conversation into something else. Not a discussion about feelings, but a discussion about facts, deadlines, and documents. And that's exactly the shift in posture we're going to explain now, with the right words that make the bank representative completely change the tone of the call. The phrase that changes the direction of this call isn't a threat, isn't shouted, and isn't an argument. It's a simple, direct request, but an extremely powerful one. I need you to confirm, in writing, the exact status of my foreclosure process, including the dates of every notice sent and which alternatives were evaluated before this decision. It sounds like an ordinary sentence, almost bureaucratic, but its effect is immediate. The instant the homeowner stops talking about fear and starts talking about documents, the conversation changes direction completely. It stops being, I'm going to lose my home, and becomes what procedures were actually carried out up to this point. And that shift in focus is what creates room for mistakes, delays, or failures in the process to come to light. It's important to understand that the goal here isn't to confront the bank aggressively or with hostility. This isn't about fighting or accusing anyone of acting in bad faith. It's about making clear, calmly and firmly, that you know your rights. And that changes everything. When a representative realizes they're talking to someone who knows the rules of the game, the tone of the call shifts almost instantly. The casual rush tone gives way to something more cautious, more formal, because now there's someone on the other end paying attention to every detail. This shift in posture doesn't guarantee on its own that the house will be saved, but it creates something extremely valuable: time. Time to understand what actually happened. Time to check whether every legal step was followed correctly. Time to negotiate, to look for alternatives, or to identify failures that can in some cases suspend or delay decisions that seemed final. And it's precisely these failures, these details, that go unnoticed in the rush of the moment that the next part is going to cover. Because often, hidden among dates, protocols, and documents, there's an opportunity nobody told the homeowner they still had. Many people don't realize it, but mistakes within a foreclosure process happen more often than you'd think. A notice that should have been sent by certified mail and wasn't? A wrong date on an official document? A review of alternatives that in practice was never really done, even if the bank claims otherwise. These details may seem small, but under the law they carry enormous weight. In many U.S. states, before an auction can happen, the bank is required to evaluate loss mitigation programs. This includes options like a repayment plan for the overdue amount, a modification of the loan terms, or even authorization for a negotiated sale of the property, known as a short sale. And the most surprising part is that some people only discover these options existed after they'd already been told the house was about to go to auction. This happens because each state has its own rules, its own deadlines, and in many cases that deadline is short. Sometimes it's just a few days between the final notice and the scheduled date. And that's exactly why every minute counts and every detail of the conversation with the bank needs to be carefully documented. Write down the full name of whoever answers. Write down the exact time of the call. Ask for and keep the reference or case number for that contact. Request that any relevant information be sent in writing, whether by letter or by email. These details, which may seem overly bureaucratic to matter, are exactly the kind of proof that can make a difference later if it becomes necessary to show that some step of the process wasn't carried out correctly. Many families miss real opportunities simply because they didn't know they should ask. Not because the law wasn't on their side, but because nobody told them those questions existed. There's a moment within this story when everything shifts. It's not the moment the house is saved, because that doesn't always happen. It's the moment the person stops reacting purely out of fear and starts acting with strategy. It's the difference between someone who just hears the news and falls apart and someone who hears that same news and asks, okay, so what exactly has been done and what can still be done? This shift in posture isn't about pretending everything's fine or denying how serious the situation is. It's about understanding that panic and clarity rarely go hand in hand. When someone is in shock, it's easy to accept anything said on the other end of the line as absolute truth. But when that same person takes a breath, gets organized, and starts asking the right questions, the whole game changes. Not because the bank is simply going to abandon the process, but because now there's someone tracking every step closely. It's important to be clear that knowing your rights isn't a guarantee the house will be kept. It would be misleading to promise that. What knowledge really guarantees is something else, maybe even more valuable. The certainty that no opportunity was lost due to a lack of information. Many families, years later, discover that alternatives existed. At the time of the process assistance programs, deadlines to contest, notice errors, and deeply regret not asking the right questions at the right time. Protecting your assets is part of this story, but it's not the only part. Protecting your credit, which will impact your financial life for years, is also at stake. Protecting your time, which can be used to reorganize, seek guidance, negotiate deadlines, or even plan for a more dignified transition, is also part of the equation. And protecting your negotiating options simply means not closing doors that were still open just because nobody mentioned they existed. The difference between someone who loses everything quickly and someone who manages to negotiate, buy time, or even reverse a situation that seemed lost almost always begins in a single instant, not in months of legal disputes, not in expensive or complicated appeals, but in the response given in the very first seconds of that call, a question asked calmly, a request for written confirmation, a name written down, a time recorded, a case number saved, small actions that added together completely change the course of a story that seemed to already have a set ending. So before accepting that the house is lost, before signing any paperwork, before promising to move out by a certain date, it's worth pausing to confirm exactly what the bank has done so far when it did it, whether it followed every step required by law, and what alternatives might still be on the table. Because often, the difference between giving up and continuing to fight isn't about having more money or more time. It's simply about knowing at the right moment exactly what to ask. If this information opened your eyes to rights you didn't even know you had, that's exactly why this channel exists. Here, every video is made to give you clarity in moments that tend to come full of fear and confusion, whether they involve banks, landlords, or homeowners associations. If this content helped you, hit like, because that shows this kind of information needs to reach more people going through the same situation right now. And subscribe to the channel, because every week there's a new topic about your rights as a tenant, homeowner, or property buyer in the United States, always explained in a simple, straightforward way without legal jargon.